My mom slid a legal agreement across the iPad I bought her and told my siblings to watch me sign away my right to mother them. So I picked up that pen, smiled, and gave her exactly what she asked for. The iPad was mine. I want you to understand that before anything else, the iPad sitting on the kitchen table that Tuesday afternoon, the one my mother slid across to me like she was a lawyer presenting closing documents. I had bought it for her birthday 8 months earlier. $349 saved from babysitting the Hendersons kids every Friday night for 4 months straight because I was 17 and didn't have a real job yet. And because I thought maybe a gift like that would make her feel appreciated, seen, like someone in this family was paying attention to her. She slid it back to me with a legal agreement on the screen, typed, formatted clauses and everything. My brother Marcus was leaning against the refrigerator with his arms crossed, 14 years old, and doing his best impression of someone who had leverage. My sister Mia was sitting at the table already, 10 years old, and looking at me with the particular expression she got when she wasn't sure which way the wind was blowing. Cautious, watchful, waiting to see which side would win before she committed. My mother, Diane Williams, stood at the head of the table. She'd done her hair. She was wearing the good earrings. She had staged this. You're overstepping? Jasmine, she said, I need you to sign it. Sibling duties only. You don't get to keep acting like you run this house. I looked at the screen, read every word. It wasn't long, barely half a page, but it had been written carefully, enough that I knew she hadn't done it herself. Someone had helped her, a friend maybe, or someone she'd found online. It outlined in plain language that I, Jasmine Renee Williams, age 17, agreed to limit my involvement in household management to peer level, sibling interaction only, and relinquished any self-appointed authority over the minor children in the home. My siblings stood behind her like they just won a war. I picked up the stylus. I smiled. And I mean, I really smiled. The kind that starts in the chest. I signed my name in clean cursive, right on the line. If a sister is what you want, I said, then a sister is exactly what you'll get. Nobody moved. For a second, my mother looked satisfied. Marcus looked triumphant. Mia looked relieved in the uncertain way of someone who doesn't fully understand what they've just agreed to. I handed the iPad back, got up from the table, walked to my room, and closed the door. Quietly behind me, I sat on my bed for a long time. I wasn't crying. I was thinking. I was thinking about what Monday morning was going to look like. And I was thinking about how 9 years of invisible labor was about to become very, very visible. I was 9 years old. The first time I made breakfast for my siblings. Marcus was 6. Mia had just turned 2. My mother was in her bedroom with a man named Derek who drove a white pickup truck and smelled like cigarettes and too much cologne. It was a Saturday. I remember the specific quality of that morning light, thin and yellow through the kitchen blinds, the kind of early fall light that makes everything look slightly wrong. I climbed onto the counter to reach the cabinet. I made scrambled eggs because that was the only thing I knew how to make. I burned the first batch and had to start over. I got Marcus situated in front of the television with a plate and a sippy cup of apple juice, then went back to try to feed Mia in her high chair. That was the first morning. It was not by any measure the last. What happened over the next 8 years was not a dramatic collapse. It was a slow transfer. My mother was not a monster in the obvious sense. She loved us. I believe that even now, but she was 24 years old when she had me, and she had never really finished growing up herself. She worked. She had a job at a medical billing office downtown, 9 o'clock to 5 o'clock, and she kept that job, and the bills mostly got paid. But the interior life of the household, the invisible infrastructure that makes a family actually function that drifted to me with such gradual inevitability that by the time I was 12, I couldn't have told you exactly when it happened. I learned to cook from YouTube, seriously. I watched a 45-minute video on how to make a proper grocery list when I was 10 years old. I learned about nutrition, labels. I learned how much a pack of chicken thighs cost at the Kroger on Westbrook versus the one on Palmetto, and which bus to take when mom needed the car. I forged her signature on permission slips and school forms so many times that by 8th grade, my version of her signature looked more like hers than hers did. There was one particular incident I think about now. Marcus was 11 and he'd gotten into a fight at school, a bad one, bad enough that the principal called for a parent conference. I called my mother at work and she said she couldn't leave early. And could I handle it? I was 14. I sat in Principal Garrison's office at Creekside Middle School wearing my nicest sweater and I handled it. I talked about Marcus's home environment. I asked about counseling resources. I took the referral sheet. Principal Garrison looked at me across that desk with an expression I couldn't fully decode at the time, something between admiration and concern, and said, "You're very mature for your age." Jasmine, I didn't know yet that this was not a compliment. I thought it was. My mother was not cruel about the arrangement exactly. She didn't thank me either. It was more that she developed a kind of practiced amnesia about what I actually did. She believed on some level that things just ran, that the house operated by some benevolent domestic magic. When I reminded her of something I'd done, she'd get annoyed. You don't have to announce everything, Jasmine. Nobody asked you to do all that. And when I didn't do something, she'd be confused and hurt, like a system experiencing an unexpected error. I had a boyfriend for 3 months in junior year. His name was Devin, and he was funny and smart, and he played bass guitar. We broke up because I kept canceling plans to handle things at home. He wasn't unkind about it. He just said, "Jazz, I feel like I'm always competing with your family." I wanted to explain to him that it wasn't like that I didn't have a choice. But even as I opened my mouth, I realized I didn't entirely believe that anymore. That was October of my junior year, 6 months before the iPad. I had started to pull back slightly, started saying no to a few things, setting small, tentative limits, and my mother had noticed, and apparently she decided the solution was to formalize my limits for me, to make my withdrawal from the role official and binding, to ensure that I could not choose on some future Thursday morning to simply resume being useful. She'd gotten the agreement written up. She told my siblings she'd plan the whole scene at the table. What she had not planned for was the fact that I had been running everything, and now I was going to stop. Monday morning, I woke up at 6:15. Old habit. I lay there for exactly 1 minute, listening to the sounds of the house, the particular morning silence that I used to fill with motion. Then I got up, took a shower, got dressed, and drove to the Starbucks on Henderson Avenue. I sat at a table by the window. I ordered a spinach and feta wrap and an iced caramel macchiato. I opened my laptop. I did some homework. I watched the morning happen around me at a pleasant distance. At 7:42, I received a text from Marcus. "Hey, where's my clean gym shirt?" I looked at it. I set my phone face down on the table. I finished my coffee. By the time I got to school at 8:15, Marcus had already missed first period. He'd overslept. Nobody had woken him up. He made it in for second period, but he didn't have his gym bag and he didn't have his homework, and he was visibly frantic in the particular way of someone who has never had to manage their own schedule and is encountering its demands. For the first time, I walked past him in the hallway. I said, "Good morning," at me. By Tuesday, the pattern was becoming clear. My mother, who had never once set an alarm for any of us, was discovering that teenagers do not wake themselves up. She was leaving for work at 7:30, which meant she was gone before any reasonable school departure time. She had apparently assumed that without my involvement, things would continue as before through some mechanism she hadn't specified. She'd left a note on the kitchen counter Monday morning. Marcus, make sure Mia eats breakfast without providing any indication of what Mia should eat, where it was, or how it should be prepared. There was a bag of frozen waffles in the freezer with 2 waffles left in it. Mia had eaten one raw because she didn't know how long to put it in the toaster. Marcus had eaten the other one and left for school 40 minutes late. By Wednesday, my mother had been written up at work. She'd been 2 hours late. She'd gone back to get Marcus up a second time after he fell back asleep, and she'd missed a meeting. She was furious when she got home. She stood in the kitchen and talked about how nobody in this family respected her time. I was at the kitchen table, studying. I looked up once, looked back, down. Jasmine, are you going to say anything? You're venting, I said. I'm listening. You could help. I signed an agreement. The silence that followed was tense and particular. She went to her room. Thursday, I was heading out the front door at 7:50 when Marcus caught me in the hallway. He was wearing the same gray t-shirt he'd been wearing since Monday. I could smell him from 3 feet away. Hey, Jazz, quick favor. Can you grab me some deodorant? Mine ran out. I pulled the agreement up on my phone. I'd screenshotted it. I turned the screen toward him. That sounds like mothering. His face went through several distinct phases. Disbelief, then irritation, then the particular expression of a 14-year-old boy who has just encountered the concept of consequences for the very first time. You're being dramatic, he said. Have a good day, Marcus. He muttered something at my back. The smell followed him for another week. Friday, the guidance counselor sent an automated attendance alert. Marcus had missed 7 class periods in 4 days. Mia had been flagged for arriving without lunch money 3 days running. The school cafeteria had a policy about that. They'd been giving her a peanut butter sandwich from the emergency tray, which she ate alone because she was embarrassed. She hadn't told anyone because she didn't want to get in trouble. I knew this because Mia texted me about it Friday night at 11:30 long after she should have been asleep. She wrote, Jazz, I'm really hungry. Can you make something? I texted back, there's frozen pasta in the bottom drawer of the freezer. The microwave instructions are on the bag. She texted, I don't know how to use the microwave for that. I sent her a voice message walking her through it step by step because she was 10 years old and hungry, and I was not able to let a 10-year-old go to sleep hungry, but I said nothing to my mother. I did nothing to fix the larger situation because the larger situation had been formally and legally established by a signed agreement, and I had signed it with a smile, and I meant every word. Saturday was Mia's orchestra recital at Hartfield Community Center. I arrived on my own 15 minutes early and found a seat near the back. I had not reminded my mother about the recital. I had not laid out Mia's dress, which I had picked up from the dry cleaner 4 months earlier and hung carefully in her closet in its plastic sleeve. I had not checked that she had her music folder or her rosin or clean hair. Mia walked onto the stage in her good dress, wrinkled, badly wrinkled, like it had been bald. Up in a drawer, there was a stain on the left side, something orange, maybe juice or sauce that had clearly been there for some time and not treated. Her hair was in a rushed ponytail with several chunks escaping at the sides. She looked out into the audience with the particular expression of a child who already knows something is wrong, but hasn't been told what yet. The parents around me went quiet in that uncomfortable way. A few murmured, "Hey." Woman next to me leaned toward her husband and said something I didn't catch. 2 kids in the orchestra pit pointed, and whispered to each other. Mia played well. She really did. She was genuinely talented, but the performance barely registered because the whole room was looking at the dress. After the recital in the hallway, her teacher, Ms. Okafor, a kind woman in her 50s who genuinely cared about her students, pulled my mother aside near the water fountain. I moved to where I could be heard. I stepped right in. I can actually speak to that, I said loudly, enough that every parent in that hallway could hear me clearly. We had a family restructuring recently. I was overstepping my sibling boundaries. My mother made that official with a written agreement, so she's fully in charge now. For really the first time. Isn't that right, Mom? My mother's face went the color of chalk. I held on my phone and showed Ms. Okafor the screenshot. She read it. Her expression shifted from concern to something slower and more complicated. No more Jasmine dictatorship, I said. The words came out steady. They tasted like 8 years of accumulated weight finally being set down. Mia had been standing 6 feet away. She bolted for the bathroom. I could hear her crying from the hallway. My mother stood frozen while parents gathered, while Ms. Okafor held the phone with both hands and kept reading, while the entire comfortable social machinery of a suburban community center recital stopped making its usual noise and directed itself at Diane Williams. I walked to my car. I drove home. I made dinner for one. Monday morning, my phone rang at 7:58. Unfamiliar number, local area code. Is this Jasmine Williams? Yes, this is Renata Solis from the guidance office at Hartfield Middle and Elementary. We've received multiple reports over the past week regarding the welfare of Marcus and Mia Williams. Are you available to speak? I have class in 20 minutes, I said, but I can talk now. Can you describe your role in your siblings' daily care? I don't have one anymore, I said. I had authority over their care for a long time, but the family determined I was overstepping. There's a formal agreement. I'd be happy to send you a copy. A long pause. How long did you have that role? Since I was 9 for about 8 years. Another pause. Longer. Thank you, Jasmine. We may need to follow up. I understand, I said. I'm available anytime. I went to class. That afternoon, the school made a report to Child Protective Services. I didn't find out until that evening when my mother came into my room at 8:17, still in her work clothes, makeup halfway off, looking like someone who had been hit by something she hadn't seen coming. CPS is coming, she said. They're doing a home visit. I looked at her. If they see the house like this. Like what? I said. She stopped. She looked at the kitchen through the doorway. I could see it from where I sat. Dishes in the sink with mold furring the edges of the plates. 3 full trash bags piled near the back door because nobody had taken them out. The refrigerator, which I had stopped restocking 10 days ago, holding 1 container of leftover rice that had probably turned 2 days ago and a half. Empty bottle of ketchup. The laundry situation, which I did not need to see to know the condition of. She knew. Jasmine, you made me sign an agreement, I said. The doorbell rang at 9:04. We both rose. The social worker's name was Patricia Ellerby. She was in her mid-40s, natural hair, reading glasses, on a lanyard around her neck, a tablet in one hand, and a calm that I recognized immediately as professional. The particular calm of someone who has walked into rooms like this before and knows what comes next. She stepped through the door and her whole face changed. The smell hit her first. Rotting food, old garbage, stale. Laundry. Then her eyes moved. They moved the way a trained person's eyes moved, systematically documenting, cataloging. The kitchen, the trash, the sink, the floor. She pulled out her tablet and started photographing. My mother stood frozen in the entryway while the camera clicked. Click, click, click. The refrigerator open, the sink close up. The bags by the door, the counterware. Dirty dishes had been stacked so long. They'd become a fixture. Ms. Ellerby turned to me. Can you tell me what your role in this household was before the agreement? I took a breath. I was calm. I had been calm since Tuesday. Maybe I had been building toward calm my whole life, and this was just the first time I'd had room to feel it. Everything I said. Can you be specific? Wake-ups at 6:30, breakfast and packed lunches. Laying out clean clothes, homework. Supervision, dinner, dishes, laundry. I ran the laundry twice a week sorted by person, doctor appointments, dentist appointments. I had taken Marcus to his pediatric asthma checkup in February and tracked his inhaler prescriptions. I had taught Mia about her body, about hygiene, about what to do when she eventually got her period, because our mother had never had that conversation with either of us. I had forged signatures. I had attended conferences. I had learned to cook from the internet because my mother's culinary range, as far as I could tell, extended to cereal and occasionally toast. How long? Ms. Ellerby asked. Since I was 9 years old. She stopped typing. Marcus came in from upstairs then, drawn by the voices. He walked in looking annoyed, the specific annoyance of someone who'd been inconvenienced. He was wearing the same gray shirt. He'd stopped noticing the smell, or had decided to stop noticing it. Is this about school? Because I've been meaning to catch up. Can you tell me about your current living situation? Ms. Ellerby asked him. He looked at the kitchen. He looked at the trash. Something shifted in his face. I mean, it's been kind of rough lately. Have you had regular meals this week? A pause. Not really. There's not much food. Mia came in behind him. She saw Ms. Ellerby and immediately started crying. Not dramatically, not for effect, but the way a 10-year-old cries when they've been holding something in for too long. And the first available adult authority figure makes it suddenly possible to let go. I'm so hungry all the time, she said. I don't know how to use the washing machine. Jasmine always did everything. She did everything, and we told her to stop. She looked at me when she said the last part. It wasn't accusatory. It was just true. She was reporting the facts of her situation the way a child does when they don't yet know how to arrange facts into a narrative. Marcus, to his credit, didn't contradict her. Yeah, he said quietly. I've been in this shirt for a while. Nobody ever taught me how to do laundry. I just always did it. Ms. Ellerby made calls right there in front of us. She stepped 6 feet away and spoke in a low voice, and I could hear the words. Immediate intervention, uninhabitable conditions, and clear neglect before she turned back to face the room. My mother grabbed my arm. Her fingers were tight, and her nails broke skin, and I looked down at the marks and then up at her face, and her face was a thing I had never seen before. Not quite fear, not quite guilt, but something in between. Those two things that doesn't have a clean name. Tell them you'll help, she said. Tell them things are going to change. Tell them. I peeled her fingers off of mine one by one. You made me sign an agreement, I said. The supervisor arrived at 9:48. His name was Gerald Mims, and he was older, gray at the temples, and he reviewed Ms. Ellerby's photographs and notes with the methodical efficiency of someone who had seen too many kitchens like ours. He spoke to my mother for 14 minutes. I know because I counted. Then he said, Mrs. Williams, based on what we've documented tonight, we are placing both children in emergency protective custody, pending a full assessment. My mother dropped to her knees on the kitchen floor. Not a metaphor. She literally dropped like something had been cut. She grabbed Mr. Mims's arm, and she was saying things, promises and explanations and justifications, and he was speaking to her calmly and firmly about next steps, and she wasn't hearing any of it. Workers went upstairs. I could hear them moving through rooms. 2 small bags came back down. Marcus had packed his own. Mia's had been packed by the Worker, quickly, practically, the essentials. Mia looked at me across the kitchen. I had been the fixed point in her life for as long as she could. Remember, I had been the one who made things right. She looked at me with 8 years of trust and the absolute expectation that I was going to fix this. I didn't move. Marcus followed the workers without looking at me. He was holding it together by not looking at anyone. They walked them to the SUV, parked at the curb. I stood in the doorway. It was a clear night, cool, the kind of September night that smells like something ending. Mia got to the curb and spun around. She screamed at me from 20 feet away, not words at first, just sound, the kind that comes from somewhere below language. Then, you did this on purpose. I watched their faces disappear behind the window glass. I watched the SUV drive away. I stood in the doorway for a long time after the tail lights vanished. My mother was on the floor behind me still. I went to my room. I put my headphones on. I did not cry until approximately 2 o'clock in the morning, and when I did, it was quiet and thorough, and I let it happen completely. The investigation took 3 weeks. During that time, I was interviewed twice, once by Ms. Ellerby and once by a family court investigator named Shannon Park, who asked me very precise questions and wrote down my answers with the focused attention of someone building a case. I told her everything. I told her about the forged signatures, the medical appointments, the conference with Principal Garrison. When I was 14, the grocery runs, the YouTube cooking tutorials. I told her about Devin and how I'd lost him to the same obligations I'd just signed away. I told her about my college applications, which I had been filling out alone because my mother had never once asked to see them, and about the partial scholarship I'd been offered from a university 400 miles away that I hadn't yet been able to commit to because I hadn't known how to leave. She listened. She wrote. The investigation found what? The investigation was always going to find that Diane Williams had for the better part of a decade relied on her minor daughter to perform the functional labor of a parent, and that in the absence of that labor, she had been unable to maintain a safe and stable home environment for her children. Marcus and Mia were placed with my aunt, Carol Indicator. Aunt Carol, my mother's older sister, a woman of spectacular competence who had always privately disapproved of how my mother ran things, took them in without complaint and with a kind of quiet determination that I recognized as a family trait. She called me the first day. I know what you did, and I know why. You did it, she said. You were right. It was the first time an adult who knew my situation had said that to me. I cried for the second time. My mother, meanwhile, came apart in stages. She was required to complete parenting classes, individual therapy, and a home management assessment before Marcus and Mia could be returned to her. She was furious about this at first, furious in the specific way of someone who believes the injustice is being assessed against them rather than the one they committed. She called me several times in those first days. I let most of them go to voicemail. The messages oscillated between remorse and blame, sometimes within the same message, sometimes within the same sentence. On the 4th day, she came to my room. I was still living in the house, a detail that felt surreal, and sat on the edge of my bed and said, I never meant for it to be like this. I looked at her for a long moment. I know you didn't, I said, and I meant it. That was the hardest part to hold. She hadn't meant for it to be like this. She had simply never looked directly at what it was. She started therapy the following week. I know this because she told me, not asking for credit, just telling me the way people sometimes need to report their own progress to someone they've hurt because they don't know who else to tell it to. I listened. I didn't perform approval, but I listened. 3 weeks after Marcus and Mia left, there was a knock at the front door of my friend Priya's house, where I'd moved for the last month. Before college, I opened the door. Marcus Dirty clothes, heavy backpack. Red eyes, the kind from crying, not from. Sleep deprivation, though probably both. He'd gotten taller in 3 weeks, or maybe. I just stopped accounting for how much of him I'd been carrying. Jazz. His voice was rough. I can't do it. I can't do the group home situation. They moved me from Aunt Carol's because there wasn't enough room when they brought in Cousin Deja and her kids, and it's too much. Can I stay here? Just a few nights. I'll sleep on the floor. Please. His face was doing the thing it did when he was little and had woken up from a nightmare and come to find me open in a way I hadn't seen since he'd grown too old to let himself be open. My hands were shaking when I reached for my phone. He saw the motion. He knew what I was doing. His face went from hopeful to shocked to furious in about 4 seconds. The whole arc of it right there at the front door. Are you kidding me? He said. You're pulling up that agreement right now? After everything? Marcus, I'm your brother. I'm standing at the door. You're going to show me a screenshot? Marcus, stop. I held up one hand. I'm not pulling up the agreement. He stopped. I turned the phone toward him. I'd open my calendar. A date circled in red. I leave for school in 19 days. I said, I've been accepted to Callaway. Full scholarship, room and board. I'm going. He stared at the screen. Rias, Mom said you can sleep in the guest room. For the time I'm still here. I already asked, but Marcus, in 19 days, I'm leaving. And this, I gestured vaguely at. All of it, at the entirety of the situation, this is not going to follow me there. You understand? He stood in the doorway for a long time. Yeah, he said finally. His voice was very small. Okay. He came inside. I am writing this from a city 400 miles from the house I grew up in. My dorm room is small and impractical, and mine. I decorated it with plants I actually chose and a desk lamp I bought with my own work study money and a print of a painting I've loved since I was 14, but never had a wall to put it on. I wake up in the mornings to my own alarm, eat breakfast according to my own appetite, and spend my time on things that belong to me. My mother calls on Sundays. We've settled into something cautious and honest, the kind of relationship that has to be rebuilt from the foundation because the original structure was never sound. She completed her parenting classes. Marcus and Mia are back with her now with home visits with a family support worker with structures in place that should have existed years ago. She is learning at 41 how to run a household. It is slow. It is real. Mia texted me last month a photo of a meal she'd cooked herself. Pasta, garlic bread, a salad. She'd followed a recipe online. She captioned it, I used YouTube like you used to. I stared at that text for a long time before I responded. Marcus called me 3 weeks into a semester to ask me how to do laundry, not to ask me to do it, to ask me how. There's a difference. I talked him through it. He said thank you. He meant it. I think about that Tuesday often. The kitchen table, the iPad I bought, my name in cursive on a line that was supposed to diminish me, what my mother didn't understand, what none of them understood. When she staged that scene and set those terms was that the agreement wasn't a limitation. It was a door. She handed me the key and called it a punishment. I've spent a lot of time trying to locate the right feeling about all of it, not anger that burned itself out in stages. Not grief exactly, though something adjacent to it. What I keep circling back to is this. I was 9 years old and I made scrambled eggs on a Saturday morning, and that was the first brick in a wall I spent 8 years building around my family to keep them safe. The wall was real. The labor was real. The love inside it was real, even when it wasn't recognized, even when it was mistaken for overreach. I can't get those years back. I'm not supposed to be the one who had to spend them that way, but I did. And I'm still here. And I signed that agreement with a smile because somewhere In the part of me that had kept the lights on since the 4th grade, I already knew I wasn't signing something away. I was signing something open.